Strickland versus Cannonier. Guys, that's a great fight. That's a great fight, and that's this weekend. That was a great fight from the day that it got announced. I mean, that was one of those that stood out with me. Ooh, really? Those two. Interesting spot for Cannonier. Cannonier loses his last outing for a world title fight, but he stays in a main event. Sean Strickland loses his last outing by stoppage, moves up to a main event. It's interesting. It's hard to do. There's ways to do that. I would encourage you to observe those ways. That's a lesson for another day. But here we are. Now, when you put Jared in a main event, there are certain expectations of your main event guys. You're not going to get them from Jared. And we're not going to give Jared a hard time about that because that's very consistent. There's no reason to expect that Jared's going to go out and blow up a fight and do certain things in the media. It's not what he does. He's never done it before. He's not going to start now. But Jared's a hell of a competitor, and he is one hell of a tough guy. I really didn't like the way that his Adesanya fight was discussed because it was discussed from a standpoint of Adesanya basically having a choice, playing cat and mouse, choosing to not go out there and finish him, as opposed to, hey, Jared's giving him some good looks. Jared's holding up. Jared is still moving around. Jared's still in the pocket. He's trying to find his opportunity. Get a little frustrated, but he's not backing down. I mean, I really thought that Jared should have been looked at a little bit differently. If you go 25 minutes with Adesanya, you're pretty good at fighting. The end. Doesn't matter if he's carrying you or not, of which he did not, by the way, nor would he. Ridiculous statement. You go 25 minutes with him, you're pretty good at this. Now, Jared versus Strickland, I feel as though has a lot on it. The fact that it's a main event, I think, proves my point. The fact that Sean Strickland could get finished in the first round and then return to a main event, right? This is a very meaningful guy. And Jared wants to stay at the top, which, by the way, with a win, he does. Now, how's Jared beat him? I'm asking you the same question for Sean Strickland in just a minute, but how's Jared beat him? It would seem as though he's going to have to out-kickbox him, which is something that Jared is highly prepared to do because it's what it did in his last contest. So it would seem as though he needs to out-kickbox him, not to mention I would guess that he has a level of confidence that that will work only because Sean fell down in his last fight in a kickboxing realm. Now, that could be very misguiding and very misleading. I'm sharing for you that I would suspect that went into the equation that comes out the other side that has Jared thinking he's going to go out and make it a striking heavy contest. That's interesting to me. And Sean likes to do the same thing. People always put Sean Strickland into a category of grappler. He's real good at grappling, but if you were to put him in a category, you should put him in the category of kickboxer. That is what he prefers to do. I mean, did you see his fight with Uriah Hall, just by example? That is what Sean prefers to do, is stand up and strike. And I don't know how that's not known. I don't know how that's a little bit more obvious about him. I feel as though he's done his part to make that known. Did you see his fight with Jack Hermanson? Just example. But how bad does Sean want to do that? Does he want to do it as bad as he's always wanted to do it, or does he change, right? I mean, we see that. We hear that a lot with MMA. We don't see it as much. That came over from the world of boxing, and we do see it there all the time, that when a guy gets knocked out one time, he is not the same again. There then becomes a inaccurate analysis of the data, which is that your chin, once you get knocked out one time, isn't the same. That is not the case, and it's not what happens. When a guy gets knocked out, that frightens him. When he gets frightened and he's not fighting the same way, he's not throwing the same offense because he's hesitant. And when he does strike, he knows that he's open. Every time you strike, you leave yourself open. So now all of a sudden you don't strike as much. Or you strike with more of a paranoia, or you don't sell the same combinations. That is what makes him susceptible, which is what gets him hit in the future, which is what makes him get knocked out time and time again. Not anything to do with the science of a knockout as it pertains to your physiology, in this case specifically, your chin. You can't get that analysis anywhere. You cannot get that kind of analysis anywhere. All right, but where's Sean's head at? And we don't see it as much in MMA. He's a human being. He has the right to go out and question those things. He definitely has a newfound respect. He did not think that could happen to him. Is that going to make him hesitant? A little bit of a stretch with Sean Strickland. I don't think he's going to be hesitant. I don't think that he's even thought of as far through as what I just said. I think you have a really interesting match here. I think in most cases, championship rounds favor Sean Strickland. I'm not ready to say that against Cannonier, because Cannonier has been doing main events. He's been doing championship rounds. I haven't seen him fade in the past. I didn't see him fade in his last fight, where he went rounds 4 and 5. Seems like a guy that can hold up, which means you're going to have a really fun contest. And I don't feel like it's getting enough attention. That isn't from a lack of effort or promotion. That is the ebb and flow of this sport. When you have a high, like anything, when it goes up, must come down. The sport was up. It had a pay-per-view, it had a world title fight. It goes down, it comes back right. I mean, it's just one of these things. And this fight is getting sandwiched in between, but this fight's a real treat, and it also matters for the division tremendously. Where would Sean Strickland go from here? Who is Sean Strickland going to call out? Like, things start to get really interesting. Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa, by example. Sean Strickland versus Robert Whittaker. I mean, just by example, like, these start to be some very interesting matches. Jared Cannonier at 185. Jared Cannonier to welcome Khamzat Chimaev to the division. I mean, there starts to get some really interesting matches. Something meaningful is going to happen for the winner. And the loser, whoever that is very unlikely to return, at least in their next match, to a main event. So now you have consequence. But we want that as fans, don't we? We want something detrimental. We want this to be career affecting. We want to see that side of it, don't we? I feel like this fight's got a little bit of everything that we generally like. So let's give it a little bit of attention.